And so I'll call the meeting to order, 6:01. And make sure I get the right document up here. So the disclaimer, this meeting will be conducted via remote video and teleconference, excuse me, pursuant to 1 MRSA, sorry, subsection 403-A. Members of the public may join the meeting by phone by dialing 1-929-205-6099 using meeting ID 817-2571-1119 and password 280819 or via computer at the link provided. Members of the public may also submit comments by using the form on the city's website under email city departments/city council. And we'll move right on in the agenda to the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll lead the Pledge of Allegiance, so if everybody would mute their microphones. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. A brief moment of silence, please. Okay, thank you very much for that. We'll move on to roll call. I need to just bring up another document here. And going down the list, roll call, Councillor Hanselman.
Present.
Councillor Hurley.
Present.
Becky Brink.
Present.
Jason Rice.
Present.
Chase Clark.
Present. Wesley
Davey.
Present.
And I'm obviously present, so we have a full house here tonight. Moving on to adjustments to the agenda, we have one in particular and that I'm aware of, and that is that I believe it's Superintendent Nelson has some information that he would like to present to us this evening. Matt, are you here? Because I'm going to give you your choice to where you want to fit in on the agenda.
Yes, I am here, and I do have information that I'd like to share with the Budget Committee.
Okay, so would you like to do that? I guess your choices are under old business. You have the agenda in front of you, so it really isn't going to make much of a difference. But you can put this under old business. We can put this with new business. You can go before the city presentation, or you can go after the city presentation. How's that for some options for you?
Sure, they all work. So whatever's easiest. Yeah.
Okay, why don't we do this under new business, and you can jump in just before the city manager presents his budget.
And what I have, Chair, is a presentation. So I don't know if that, where that fits, but I do have something that is part of the information I'm sharing as a brief presentation.
Yep. Okay. Yep. I think that's fine. And then when the city manager is done, we can move on and have everything completed, so we can look at it that way. All right, item 6 on the agenda is approval of the minutes for March 18th, last week. Can I have a motion for approval of the minutes, please?
So moved.
Is that you, Maura?
This is Becky.
Becky, I'm sorry. You're right at the top of my screen there. I see you. Okay. We have a second.
Second.
Okay, and that was Wes. That was you?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right. Any discussion on the minutes? Everything there as we remember them? All right. Once again, we have to do a roll call vote on this. So, Councillor Hanselman?
Yes.
Councillor Hurley?
Yep.
Becky Brink?
Yes.
Jason Rice?
Yes.
Jace Clark?
Yes.
Wesley Davey?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes, so that's a unanimous vote on the minutes. So now, public participation. I know there are some people who have loosely contacted me with some concerns about the budget. So if you would like to, I see Zendel has her hand up, but I'm just going to finish my statement. If you would like to speak to items on the budget, it looks like we're covering the whole budget, so this is all going to be on the agenda tonight. Then this is your opportunity to do that. Right now, I do see Zendel's hand up, so go ahead, Zendel.
Hi, I just wanted to say a few words about the firefighter and dispatcher positions that are being discussed. There's been a lot of talk about the concept of sustainability, but sustainability applies to more than just money. Making people work 16-hour days on a regular basis is not sustainable. It's downright dangerous. And not adequately funding our fire department so that we have to rely on mutual aid on a regular basis is dangerous as well. We shouldn't be waiting until somebody falls asleep driving home after a double shift, or someone dies because all our firefighters and EMTs are busy on other calls, and the mutual aid from another community takes too long to get here to do something about this. This is not hyperbole. This is a very real possibility. Excessive stress from overwork and being stretched too thin can also lead to serious health challenges. I realize there's no fat in this budget. Everything is important. But every organization's highest priority should be the health and safety of its people. Making our firefighters and dispatchers work under these conditions is unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that comment. And I see Lee Burnett now has his hand up, so you can go ahead, Lee.
I was going to speak about the grant writing position, but I can wait. I don't know what the proper.
I think this would be a good time to do that, Lee. So if you're prepared, I think this would be a good time to talk about the grant writer position. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for allowing me to speak. It's kind of a little bit weird, but I think hopefully some education can happen here. I worked as a part-time grant writer for the city of Sanford for 13 years. It's a part-time, no benefits position. During this period, I have secured $6.3 million for the city, broadband, brownfield, CDBG, almost $500,000 a year. During this period, my position has cost the city a total of $234,000 at most. So basically, for every dollar you spend on grant writing, I have returned $26. If you want more of this, I can help. I'd like to point out that Sanford would not have gotten half of these grants if I wasn't good at something else, which is leveraging Sanford's social capital. Funders don't give money just because it's needed. They want assurance that it's actually making a difference in people's lives. They want to see how it leverages social capital. Social capital is sort of the, hang on. All the things that make up a community. The civic participation, service clubs, business underwriting, volunteerism. I'm a spark plug for this social capital. I can give you some examples. Sometimes the city lacks the local match money to even apply for grants, but because I'm a business collaborator and fundraiser, the city has secured funding that you otherwise wouldn't have been eligible for. I'm thinking now of the businesses that contributed to help the city secure CDBG funding to build the new walkway that's going to be going through the Midtown Mall. Before that, it was a stairway we got business contributions for. Business contributions sweetened the deal for us to get money for Gateway Park. And this year we're going to try to get business contributions to match with some significant city funding to get some federal funding for splash pad at Carpentier Park. So if you want more business collaboration and funding, I can help you on that too. I'm also a networker. The Mousom Promenade is one of the city's most exciting projects. And thank you, Matt Hill, for that. He's been awesome. This is great. But one less well-known aspect of that is that the early catalyst for getting that project off the ground was some pro bono professional assistance that I secured for the city, namely some landscape design assistance and some temporary traffic calming demos that sort of attracted some attention and got people thinking about this. Likewise, the road through the mill yard. For 10 or 15 years before I was hired as a grant writer, the city had tried to get funding for a road through the mill yard and couldn't, was not successful. I took a different approach, which included a PR campaign, an open house, a tour for school kids. We got the money. We were able to build the road, which is pretty essential if we're trying to redevelop the mill yard. My networking I've used to benefit Sanford Downtown Legacy, Synergize Sanford, Springville Farm Walk, Bike Fest. And I'm using my networking skills. We're trying to get a new downtown group organized in the downtown this year. If you want more networking, I can help you. I'm also a facilitator and negotiator. Sanford's Trail Network is the envy of a lot of communities around us because it's so well integrated. And this is hugely thanks to city funding, some grants, and a lot of volunteerism. But it's also the result of support of landowners and neighborhoods. It's easy to build a trail out in the boonies. It's a lot more difficult to build trails in town, on and off private property, in and out of the public rights of way, through neighborhoods, accommodating multiple kinds of users. We've been able to extend Sanford's Trail Network because of all the agreements with 20 different landowners. Negotiating these agreements, being able to get the grants and extend our trail network is one of my passions. If you want more facilitation, negotiation, I can help you with that. So to sum up, the city pays for a grant writer, but the city gets a grant writer, a fundraiser, networker, facilitator, spark plug for Sanford's social capital. If you want more of that, I can help. Lastly, I'd like to point out that I am part of Sanford's social capital myself. My first grant was written as a volunteer. The city got $470,000. This is like catching a whale the first time out without any bait. In fact, all the money the city has spent on grant writing in 13 years, all that bait is added up to less than half. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Sorry for that interruption there at the end, Lee. Is there anything you'd like to repeat just in your last sentence there, where you were kind of over voiced here? Maybe the last couple of sentences.
I think I took enough of your time. Thank you for giving me as time as you did.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Lee. Anyone else under public participation that would like to speak this evening? Okay, I see no more hands up. Basically, we have nothing under item 8, nothing under item 9, so we'll move on to new business. And check my notes here. And so what we'll do is ask Mr. Nelson at this point to do his presentation under item 10, new business, and then we'll move on to the city manager's follow up to last week presentation. So Superintendent Nelson, if you're ready, go ahead.
Matt, do you need, are you going to share the screen?
Yeah, I need screen share, please, Steve. Thanks.
Yep, just a moment, please. It's going to take just a second to get to you, but it'll be right there. Should be able to, there you go.
All right, can everyone see that? Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak tonight. Following last week's meeting, I thought it would be best to come and share some information, supportive information around our thoughts, the school department's thoughts around the American Rescue Act and the funding that we expect to receive from that, and also our approach to carryover for that. So I put together a brief presentation. I want to thank Cheryl Fournier for her help as well. I guess that's me in the middle there dancing along. We look at it. We did talk about the federal funds that have been recently released that the Sanford School Department would be receiving. And so that's the American Rescue Plan. And that's being referred to as ESSER 3 for us in terms of what we look at. And basically what that is, it's President Biden's plan that was approved. It's a relief package. There's going to be $122 billion that will be going to pre-K through grade 12 public schools. The state of Maine is expected to receive over $411 million in this relief package. And so out of that $411 million for the state of Maine, over $370 million of that will go to public Title I schools. And how the distribution will work is those allocations are going to be based on what the districts received in their fiscal year 2020 Title I funds under Part A. And so for the Sanford School Department right now, we're expecting to receive approximately $7.6 million based on this information. You remember, you probably had heard the term $8 million as we were talking last week. At that time, we were looking to get maybe more than twice the amount of money that we received for ESSER 3, but it's not going to be right now. We're expecting we're expecting 7.6 million. And right now, as of now, that money has not, that allocation has not been released. So when you look at that, there are some specifics around that. And so there are some strings and some things that go along with that. And so these are going to be not funds that we can spend freely. There's going to be an application that we will need to fill out and to get approval to spend those funds. And so some of the expenditures that are available under these funds are really focused on air quality in schools. So that's everything from inspection, testing, maintenance, repair, replacement, upgrades, really around the idea of improving air quality in school facilities. Also, you're looking at school facility repairs and improvements. And really what we're looking at is being able to get our kids back to school through the pandemic and be able to do things that we can to reduce any possibility for transmission of the virus. A big part of the plan is educational recovery and addressing learning loss. There's also planning and implementing activities related to summer learning. There's also a big focus on mental health services and supports for that. Obviously, there's going to be use for technology, for funds for their hardware, software, and connectivity, providing meals to students during school closures. Obviously, school cleaning and sanitizing is a big part of it. One part of this also is there is a set aside, and it's focused on the learning recovery. And so for that, they're asking 20% of this funding, 20% of the 7.6 million. And for Sanford, that's approximately 1.5 million. That must be used to address learning recovery through the implementation of evidence-based interventions, such as summer learning or summer enrichment, extended day, comprehensive after-school programs, or extended school year programs. So when you talk about evidence-based interventions, we are awaiting guidance from the Maine Department of Education, but you can tell based on what is listed there and what I've stated, a lot of this is going to be learning for outside the regular school day. We're talking about before school, after school, summer learning, for example. Okay? And so interpretation is this term is going to be critical for us and how flexible we can be. Okay? On how we're able to achieve that. We also look at those interventions. They must be responding to the students, not only just their academic needs, but social and emotional needs to really address the impact of what the pandemic and the coronavirus has had on our students. Student subgroups, and that's everything all the way down to all of our students, but in special, specifically some of our subgroups in terms of how that's impacted as well. One of the goals that I mentioned is really with these funds, the goal for the Sanford School Department as we look at next year is getting all of our students back to school 5 days a week. And so as I click on this, be able to come up and see, and it might be difficult to see this, but what we've started to do here in the Sanford School Department is we are now looking at what is that going to take to get all of our students back 5 days a week? Understanding that in all likelihood, we're going to have to follow the physical distancing requirements that are in place. And so right now, we don't have the space or the capabilities to do that for all of our students. So we've started to do the work where you look at where what we've done is we took our enrollment for last year, what we expected for enrollment, what we could expect for student-teacher ratios, what the space entails, what we can be able to fit people in there following the physical distancing requirements. Because what's going to happen here is you're going to see that there's going to be a lot of additional resources that we have to work on. So you can see on some of these as we go through, you're looking at what we're looking at roughly. This is early. I can't stress that enough. It's early. But what we are looking at, trying to find additional classrooms, additional resources, additional teachers, and trying to get an idea of what those costs look like. Okay, so that's something that for us right now, we're starting. One of our plans is by not having pre-K in our elementary schools, we are going to be able to use that space for an elementary level for any of those extra classrooms, extra teachers, or things that we need to hire. Also, we're planning as we move out of Willard School to Sanford Pride Elementary, the old junior high school, the renovated old junior high school. We also have the facility of Willard and Lafayette available to us if we need that space. And early projections are we probably are going to absolutely need that space, especially at Willard School, for us to be able to meet all of that. So as we look at what the American Rescue Plan and those funds, we can look at right now a bulk of those funds are going there. All right, let me get us back to the screen. Okay, in addition, right now to where we are, that hopefully gives you a better idea on some of the concerns that we have about those federal funds. We also have some future subsidy concerns. Stanford, we're a very high subsidy receiver from the state of Maine. And so right now, as we project, looking forward to that, we are concerned. I'll start with enrollment. Enrollment drives the EPS formula. Right now, those are averages in terms of what we'll have for students with us next year as of October 1st, 2021, but it also takes into account this past year. In this past year, due to the coronavirus, we have very much less enrollment. So our early projections are, as we look at that EPS formula, we are concerned right now that we could lose subsidy in the area of over $300,000 based on those enrollment impacts. This year, to help with those enrollment decreases, the Maine Department of Education did adjust the EPS formula. They changed the teacher ratio. They made that at the elementary level, they changed it from 17-1 to 16-1 for a 2021-2022 upcoming school year. And so that was very helpful for us because that allowed us to receive an additional $291,000 to help buffer some of that. But right now, we are based that on a one-year change only. The other thing that we anticipate as we look at it, the valuation, based on the valuation in Sanford, and everyone in terms of seeing those valuations go up, we are worried that that is going to have an impact. Valuation goes up, they expect that the taxpayers can pay more. And so with that, we're looking at a possibility of losing almost $750,000. And that would be if there's no mill rate change. Okay, so as we look at that and we look at our carryover amounts, a concern that I have is you add up those totals, you come up to about 1.3 million in lost subsidy for the school year. Moving ahead, okay, we are looking at the idea that ways that we can help in terms of the tax increase. That is right now part of our budget that we have put forward before the school budget committee, before the city's budget committee. Right now, we're looking at some possible adjustments that we would be as recommendations. Looking at what we have for funds right now as carryover, looking through our budget and looking at the idea of making one-time purchases and offsetting debt with it. This would be additional revenue. We feel that we've identified over $50,000 that can be used there. The next line is trying to reduce our expenses. And as we've gone through and looked at reducing our expenses, we've got almost $75,000 identified in there in terms of cost of living increases, Infinite Campus, MEA Health, and reduction in expenses. The other thing we've done is we have looked at those federal funds in a way that we could use those for things that we anticipate in our budget right now that would qualify and would be used for that. And we've identified over $100,000 there. Most of that is based around curriculum and curriculum needs in libraries and whatnot, but those would be able to address and be used, a good use of those COVID funds. So as you move that forward, this looks something that can show how I've done that in my budget presentation from a couple of weeks ago. You can now focus on where we were on March 18th. What we had for you was a budget that had a 3.2% increase, just under $500,000. But when you look up at those adjustments that I just went over, they total over $225,000. And that's about a 1.5% increase just in that amount. And so that would reduce ours from just under $500,000 and a 3.2% increase to $271,501 and a 1.7% increase. With that, as we try to come back and understand the challenge that's above and in front of all of us, and also that the budget committee faces, but also a way of using our resources. So that's what I wanted to be able to present, as we had an opportunity following last week's meeting to go back and be able to look at things closer. Any questions?
Well, thank you, Matt, for all you and your department's hard work on this. I know I've been through, as well as Mrs. Brink has been through, these meetings where you have to sit and think and figure out where cuts can be made, and that's not an easy meeting to sit at. So with that comment, are there any questions for the superintendent? Yeah, Mr. Davey?
Yeah, hi, thank you. Just a point of clarification, and maybe I'm misunderstanding this. So on the lower enrollment number, you said it was, potentially the funding would go down 323,000. And then the teacher ratio, are those two related? The 291, I guess I didn't quite understand how those two were related. Does one affect the other?
They do, but at the same time, they are separate parts of the formula. So we would get impacted for enrollment, and then that would also carry down to how many teachers we have that they would identify, that they'd line up with those students. So when you do have a decrease in enrollment, you are going to be out of compliance for that student to teacher ratio. And what we've always done is we've worked hard to really stay right at that student to teacher ratio, so that we can maximize the funding that you get out of the EPS formula. If there's ways they can say you can have more teachers and you can have a less student enrollment, student to teacher ratio, but that's something they would expect to be picked up by the local. And so we've worked hard to be able to try to pay attention to those ratios. But if there's less students, and remember too, part of my presentation is that with the physical spacing requirements that we now have, that ties our hands in some respects, that drives that as well. So those are concerns that when they made that adjustment this year, they said it was a one-time adjustment. We benefited from it. So our concern is going forward, if they were to change that back, we would not benefit from it. And that would be the impact in the subsidy part of the formula.
Okay, thank you. And then just one other question. So I know that no funds have been secured as of today, right? A part of that 7 million. And I think you did a really good job explaining how that money needs to be used. As far as the plan for the rest of that money, do we know how soon that will be budgeted? Is there a timeline based on that? And how does that process work?
We're still getting information that's released to us. Usually, as I mentioned, there's an application that you kind of have to work on assigning those funds, and then the DOE would be able to come back and approve your application. Those are funds that don't have to be spent in the first year. They're giving you up until 2024 to expend those funds. For us, we're prioritizing getting our kids back to school next year, 5 days a week. And so we're in the process, and it's early, but we're trying. Those of you who are connected to our schools, we've just gone through recently increasing in-person learning from 2 days a week to 4 days a week. And so as we're navigating that, we're now planning what's it going to look like to get our kids back 5 days a week with the requirements that we have. And that's where we're trying to look at that focus. A lot of those funds would be funds that are eventually going to go away. They're federal funds, so we want to make sure that we're not building those into our budget as permanent positions.
No, sure. I was just curious on the with the amount of 7.6 million, and I obviously don't have to plan this work. So I do give you and the school committee a lot of credit for this. But when you're looking at that 7.6 million, is that, I guess, how much of that money do you think you'll be able to plan based on the needs? And this question isn't around lowering the budget dollars per se in this year. I was just curious with that 7.6 million, if we think, oh, we're going to go through that, that's going to be easy to spend, or is that going to be something that, you know, we've not been in this situation, so it's going to take some thought and time to get to what the final result will be?
Yeah, all of that. I think as you look at it, and I mean that, I'm not trying to be a wise guy. We've never been in this situation. It does sound like a lot of money. I understand that. But as we start to look at things and the things that it's needed, especially when you start talking about staffing and benefits and facilities, all of those things start to add up. And that's my concern, where people are looking at it to say that money can be dedicated strictly for tax relief. And that's where, for right now, we're early in that process that I feel like we're going to spend it. I don't think it's a situation where we'd say, sure, we're not going to spend it. I can't answer it that way right now. But I am concerned that we're not going to have it to meet all the needs that we have to. Remember, 1.5 million of that is already taken right out of it, because that's going for the learning loss for that in terms of summer programming. Kind of in some ways, I wish that would allow us to do it during the school day, because I think that's where we can really leverage a lot of impact there more so. But that was something that was part of the strings of the funds.
All right, thank you so much.
I just want to make a quick follow-up comment that surrounding the funding for education, the EPS, it really uses a wealth equalization formula. That's really its main purpose. And so there's a bottom that communities have to raise a certain amount of money. In other words, they can't have 100% of their schools, I'm being facetious there, but they can't have 100% of their schools funded through state subsidy. They have to raise a certain percentage in order to get a level of base level, if you will, of EPS money. There's also an upper level so that what they believe, like in terms of teacher ratios, what is a proper level of teacher ratio, and so you need to achieve that. But it also looks at a community that might be able to have more teachers, smaller class sizes, things like that, and say, well, if you get to this threshold, then we expect you to pay for that yourself. So it's a wealth equalization formula between, I know this is not a politically correct term, but between the property rich communities and the property poor communities. I don't consider Sanford to be a property poor community, even though we are a high receiver of state subsidy. Make that clear. But that's fundamentally how it works. And and to me, I think the superintendent spoke well to the fact that the focus needs to be on one-time costs and not inflate the budget going into the future. Sounds to me like everybody's well aware of that on just because the superintendent is presenting, well aware of that on the school side. So, okay, Councilor Hanselman has her hand up.
Thank you. And just, Bob, to reiterate what you were saying about the EPS funding, I find it a very complex subject matter, and I'm a numbers person, but Cheryl really did, and I think I said this once already, but did a fabulous job putting together a PowerPoint on that. So if anybody's inclined to understand EPS funding, that can be found on WSSR TV, and probably Cheryl will point folks in the direction of it. But, so first and foremost, I really want to thank Superintendent Nelson and the school committee team for their work on this. I think it was kind of clear where I was coming from last week, and I was certainly looking for closer to a $500,000 number, but I appreciate the effort that it took to get to the 226 roughly, and the impact that has on our net to taxation. So I'm very appreciative of the effort that went into that. The question that I have is relative to, and it's more a reminder. I sat in on all those school budget committee workshops, so I apologize for having to ask, but the Lafayette School and Willard School operating expenses, which are significant, are those in the budget currently, or are those something we're worried about having to cover with COVID funds that aren't in the budget? Does that make sense, Matt?
Yeah, I'm going to ask Cheryl. Cheryl, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah. So some of the Willards are still in the budget, but Lafayette was not in the budget because we were told that we couldn't have any expenses for Lafayette when we did the budget this year. So there is no Lafayette, other than the plowing, I think, was left in there. That was the only thing that.
And when Cheryl says we were told, that was coming from the Maine Department of Education. And what we've done through the pandemic is we partnered with the YMCA to utilize that as a site, especially for those families and those students when they were not in-person school, to be able to come back and do that. So from that standpoint, I think it doesn't mean that COVID funds couldn't be used when we're looking at space to expand that. And I think that's what you're looking for. With the idea of construction still going on, we were with the idea of also wanting to not be careful with that, knowing that our facilities to be ready, holding on to Willard and having more of their operating expenses in the budget.
So Willard's operating expenses are primarily in the budget already.
Yes.
But Lafayette's are not.
Right.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful to understand.
Okay, any other questions for Steve?
Thank you. Excellent presentation, Matt and Cheryl. I really support that. It's great to see that the understanding of using the money towards the catch up, the additional programming, the additional use of facilities. Thank goodness that we have those, right, to be able to maintain those and keep those going in order to get the distancing that you need. And all of those elements doesn't produce the, as you call it, and I'm starting to call it as well, the cliff, right? You bring this one-time funding in and it's just gone, and what do you do after that? So, I'll present later on as far as where we think the city might be able to utilize that same type of funding. But what I was going to ask you is, if you have the crystal ball, is this another year or is this 2 years, as far as, like using Willard and Lafayette for the distancing for the children and such under that? Is this so one more year of doing these kind of measures, or is this 2 more years of doing these kind of measures? What do you think?
Well, I'm hopeful. Hopeful it's 1 year. One thing we'd want to do is, if it is 1 year, we're going to commit to that 1 year. We don't want to be able to, if things change, to be able to move people back. But from where we're looking at, you do have the funds, you have time to expend those funds. And so I think some of that could be the learning loss. We could be able to make those up. As far as the spacing concerns, Steve, going beyond 1 year in the additional staffing, I'd really like to keep that at 1 year. That to me is what our plan is in the short term, based on the information that we have today. Now, if you would have asked me at this time last year, I would have told you we would have been back to school right now as well, 5 days a week. So I'm hopeful, but there is no exact date there. But if you looked in the crystal ball, I'd be looking at 1 more year of extending into those facilities to address the physical distancing.
Okay, all set? Any other questions? I'll ask one more time. Okay, thank you, Matt, for that very informative and helpful in terms of the process this evening. And it's a difficult time all the way around, but we know it's a difficult time. And good luck, seriously, with working your way through this.
And if Wes wants to come help us, he's more than welcome. We need all the help.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that, when you're ready, City Manager, you can go ahead with your presentation.
Okay, I'm going to try to display a PowerPoint here tonight, and I test drove that just before the meeting, so let's see how it works for us here.
Being influenced by all those glitzy graphics from the school department, huh? Don't want to be left behind.
Gotta have bright colors, right?
Wow, look at that, Steve.
Okay, so remember I pledged to you, if I could get the assessed data information from our assessor and the dog didn't eat my homework, we'd bring it forward for tonight. So it was awfully close. You can see you get to the first page, but the rest of it stayed intact.
Which dog was that, Steve? Was the young one?
Oh, it'll be my wife's dog, not mine.
Yeah, the
not
young
mine.
one that's misbehaving. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Okay, so hopefully this presentation serves its purpose tonight. It was about the examination to review the changes and the assessed value by category and the shifts within that taxable base. Stemming from that, then to produce an estimate of the impacts of the 2021 tax commitment on the entire taxable base. See that reflective in the mill rate and the categories that I'm going to show you. And most specifically, the single-family residential homes with a homestead exemption. Those are the categories that we specifically have looked at more diligently than any and all others. And then to use that examination to inform recommendations on amendments to the fiscal 21-22 municipal and school budgets. So this is the current, again, please note this says estimated assessed value. So the assessing department is not complete with all of these changes as of yet. They feel that they've completed the market adjustments for the various residential categories. Our assessors are still out in the field. This is the time of the year that they're rushing through the community, looking for the newly constructed, doing the assessments on that and bringing that new value in. So we know we don't have all of that new value yet, but this is the database that was given to me last. I think came through Thursday while we were actually doing the budget committee, and I started working on it from that point forward. So in this, you can see the large blue area, the single-family residential comprises 67% of the taxable value estimated for this year. We had that down to around 62% at one time, but that's grown up now to about 67%. And I'll show you all of those year-over-year changes. The next piece in here, the 1% wedge, that's condominiums. So this is, again, this is of the entire assessed database. 2% is the manufactured housing that we have here. 5% wedge is the two-family homes. 1% wedge above that is the three-family homes. 4% piece of the pie are the apartments. That's four units and higher. 2% is comprised of vacant land that we have in the community. There's no structures on it. There's a 0% in here that's not attached to anything. It's simply a space in the spreadsheet. 11% is your commercial property that can have some residential components in it. It might have, commercial on the first floor, apartments above and such, but it falls into the commercial category. So it's 11% of your taxable base is there. 6% is in your industrial complexes, your industrial buildings and such. And then there's a mixed use category in here of the top 1%, the green way. So of that, again, 67% of all the assessed value for 2021 is in single family residential homes. So I think the analysis of examining that category is very just. This slide looks at the estimated assessed values for 2021. Again, this isn't complete, but this is the numbers that I have now. The blue bars in here, you can see this is in millions of dollars. So the change year over year from last year to this year for the single family residential category was 88.06 million. See that large change there? And that accounted for 8.01, so a little over 8% increase in that as a category year over year. This is what I kept talking to you about, anticipating the impacts of COVID with all of the housing pressure that's coming in. The market analysis is driving the valuations on these homes, whether they've done improvements or not. Condominiums went up by 1.12 million, an increase of 6.14% for the category. Manufactured housing, 370,000 or 1.16%. Two families are up by 6.25 million or 7.19%. Three family up 2 million, 9.79%. Apartments, this is a very pleasing number to see. It's up 16.64 million. 32% as a category, right? And I've got another slide that's going to put the weighted averages on this. So it's not as dramatic as what you might think. Commercial, very little change there. There's been very few sales in commercial. There's been very little movement there. Very little new commercial property developed. So $1.1 million, 0.58%. Same thing in the industrial. Very little change in valuation there, but $240,000 increase. The exempt property is not taxed, so you don't see that. So looking at these numbers, the largest changes were in the single-family residential, the two-family, and the three-family, and the apartments. All of that is your primary housing sources within the community. The next graph, this is the same graph as before, but what it does is it looks at the weighted change. So in other words, if you take the $88 million, the amount of value increase in the single-family residential, and you take its proportion of the whole, you multiply that times the 8% change in that category, it's picking up 6.11% more of the assessed database now than it did in a prior year. So in other words, if you had a home of a certain value and the tax commitment was flat, you could see as much as a 6% change just because of the change in the market analysis on your particular home. So I've given you this change for all of the categories. The significant change, again, is in the single-family residential, 6.11%, and the apartments at 4.65%. So I continue to point to the apartments because it was in my first year here that there was a significant tax change anticipated and budgeted and put in. Single-family residential homes had stayed relatively stagnant, but there was a huge section in the apartments and the commercial properties that were devalued significantly in that year. There had been a 10% change in the tax commitment, and single-family homes were seeing an impact of nearly 15% because of the change in the assessed database. So again, looking at the shifts, single-family residential, a shift of 6.11%. Two-family 0.4%, three-family 0.2%, and 4.65% on the apartments. There was a 6.07% increase in the total assessed value overall.
Steve, may I ask a question here before you move on?
Yeah, go ahead, Ann.
Thank you. I just want to confirm that our TIF values of apartments aren't part of these assessed values. Have we pulled those out already?
Yes, those are not part of this equation.
Thank you.
So when we get to the tax calculation sheet, at the I think it's actually the last line that's on there, there's $900,000 of anticipated tax increment financing revenue that comes in, and it shows that it adds 0.56 mils to the taxable to the tax commitment. That's actually. It's accurate in how it shows on the sheet, but it's not accurate in what actually is occurring there because all of that $900,000 we have booked as offsetting revenues for something else on the municipal side of the equation.
But that value is not.
We're raising it and we're using it to reduce net taxation overall.
No, thank you. I just wanted to check on the value piece. Thank you.
And Steve, just a quick follow-up on the TIF statement. We have guidelines for how the TIF money can be spent. So, and we need to follow those guidelines. There's legalities involved in contracts and things like that. So even though there's $900,000 in TIF money, there's certain ways that that needs to be reinvested in the community. It can't just be used blatantly for something else.
Correct. So, and again, we have 100% of that booked out for utilization in the budget this year. So for each tax increment financing district that we have, there's a development program. The development program lays out the qualified cost that TIF district can utilize the funds that are being generated within the district. Okay, then I produced this graphic, and I've got a comparison in the spreadsheet that I can show you later on when we start looking at the numbers. But this looks at the distribution of clustering these together by group. So you can see in this $100,000 or less. So this is a property card that has a homestead exempt property on it of $100,000 or less. There's 123 of those. It comprises $10.3 million of your overall assessment. 100 to 125,000 is 317 SFRs that fall in there. That comprises just under 38 million. So here's the spread. I can show you later this evening. The significant change has happened in these three bars right here. So from 125 to $200,000, currently 60.62% of the single-family residential homes fall in those middle three bars, the high distribution bars. That shifted an entire category. Now, when I went and looked at the last data that I had on this from just 1 year prior, all of those three bars have shifted to the right because of the significant change in valuations here.
Just to give, I mean, this is a great spot for me just to make a comment. I was looking up a property today, and I'd call it mixed more than anything, but from the assessed value I looked up to the sale price was $120,000 difference. $120,000. I think people need to realize at whatever level you're looking here, houses that were assessed at 150 are selling for 250. If they're 100, they're selling for 200. That's how crazy the shift has been. So, anyway, continue.
Yeah, and please keep in mind that this is our assessor bringing them to 92%, not 100. If it was 100, there would be this shift yet again.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, and the reason he does this, that allows us to maximize the homestead exemption, veterans exemptions, all of the benefits that are linked to your percentage of assessed value. Also, it offers you, if there's some dramatic response in the market in the other direction. In other words, you could have an 8% drop in the marketable value of the homes, and that reflected within the assessment without dramatically impacting your overall assessed base. This next graphic does not account for the change in increasing property values over the years, which is the resulting shift that we're talking about tonight. But it is a good graphic, I believe, because it looks at what the tax card was for each of these values, from $100,000 up to a $450,000 homestead exempt property, 2015 through the estimated 2021. So I think the city has done a significant amount of work to reduce from where we started back in 2015, which was the high year, and we have done significant work to keep that level and or continuously producing slight reductions across the broad depth of all of these values.
Hey, Steve, I just want to point out, thank you for the sharp differences in colors. This is very easy to read. Because sometimes it's not so sharp. This is excellent. Thank you.
Right. So that's the 7-year history. Now, I have other graphics that I presented to you before that looks at that change year over year of this $100,000 house, moving from 100 to 105,000, from 105,000 to 115 and such under that. Really, that's what we're seeing back here. That's one I can show you later tonight if you want. The shift in this area here has been very dramatic. So this 1,308 in 150 to 175, that was over here at 125 to 150 just 1 year ago. It shifted that quickly the other way. This is the graph that I think everybody was seeking. This is the current municipal and school budget plugged in without any change at this current point. And what it looks at, I've got the long formula down here. So I took the assessed database, I broke it down by these categories, 0 to 100,000, 100 to 125. So I sifted it out each time for those. I then went and looked, our assessor shows the dollar change year over year as far as the assessment is concerned, and what the percentage change of that was. I took out the abnormalities, somebody built a new garage or a home or something like that, you strike that out. Then I average across all of those categories. So there might be ranches, capes, whatever the various categories of homes are in there. And I simply average the average rate of change for the homes that fall in that range of value. So, for example, the $100,000 or less had the least amount of change. They averaged 2.09% change in value year over year. So, looking at what the tax impact would be for them, I took the 2020 valuation, and I then increased that by 1 plus the 2.09%, multiplied it. So now that's worth, $102,000 instead of $100,000. You then subtract out the homestead exemption, divide it by 1,000, and multiply it by the mill for this year for 2021 at the 19 point whatever it is currently. And then you go back and look at what was that in 2020. So use the 2020 value. In other words, add $100,000 minus the homestead exemption divided by 1,000 times the mill rate for 2020. That's the delta that I'm calculating here. So you can see for 200 for each category, you see like the 225,000 to 250,000. I use the high value in each one of those categories. So this is a $250,000 tax card. It'll go up by $324 or 7.15%. With the way the budget is booked in there now. So the dollar value is here on the blue line, and the percentage change is here on the orange line. As we work on the budgets tonight, for anything that you make for amendments tonight, I can make a change in the tax rate calculation sheet, and this graphic will update for us live. So we'll be able to see what the results are.
Steve, could you go back?
You a degree?
Sorry, to show us the predominant, the highest number of homes, the 1,000 and something homes are in the 250 range. I should have written it down. 150 to
so
175.
if you go from 125 to 200,000, 60% of those fall in that range.
Thank you.
This was the predictive analysis that was done in 2019 for when we were going forward with the last $10 million for the school, the $6.2 million for the roads, LED streetlight conversions, fire station, which was not part of these numbers because it was not voted on, and the increased CIP effort for various elements. So you can see for back then, and remember we had a 4% increase, both city and school on expense, 4% increase city and school on revenues, a 4.73% increase on the overall taxable value. What that 2019 analysis did not account for is the dramatic shifts within that overall taxable value, right? So we have a minimum of 6% increase in our taxable value this year, but it's who's paying it. What portion of that taxable base are you as far as your property cut is concerned? So you can see for the $100,000 home for 2022, the year that we're talking about now, the estimated impact was $69.17. We're currently half of that as the budget sits currently. Where the numbers get skewed significantly of the $225,000 home is estimated to be $123, increase.
155, Steve. You're too far. You're too far.
Nope, fiscal year 22.
If you said 123, it's 155.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, 155. We're higher than that because this property has changed its value so significantly. It's picking up a larger portion of the overall taxable base tied up in that residential side now, as opposed to the industrial, commercial, and other elements. But I wanted to bring this forward because these are the numbers, and I think Councilor Hanselman was recognizing this. We knew we had 6 hard years in here, right? 2022 through 26, that there was going to be an increased mill rate effort, an increased tax effort in order to pay for these significant elements that have been put into the budget. It wouldn't be until the 27 tax year, 6 years from now, that we would start to see it slope back down and go the other way.
And Steve, that is primarily the bond for the roads, essentially.
The roads, the schools, and the increased effort on the CIP. And the increased effort that I continue to refer to there, well, and it's the LED streetlights. But the increased effort was in Parks and Recreation and the increased effort on the roads itself. So we're putting in basically $500,000 each of the next number of years in order to build to $4 million as opposed to $1.5 million on annualized input into the roadway system.
And if I can just
increased effort.
Yeah, if I can just follow up on that. At last year's budget committee, this was very apparent if we went down this road that we were going to be increasing taxes and that we would have that slope down. I think you said it was a 6-year slope down to get back to where we were. It was the consensus of the budget committee, the consensus of the city council, and it also went out for public referendum that fundamentally we wanted our schools and our roads fixed. And as I said way earlier in this presentation, this is the price tag. We didn't count on a pandemic being here, but this is the price tag associated with doing that work. This is not a result of just mismanagement on the part of the city council or rapid inflation on the school department or on the city side. This was planned, and we knew the taxes were going to go up this year. Again, what we didn't plan on was a pandemic. So I'll get off my soapbox here. Go ahead, Steve.
So the trap I'm trying not to fall in is we knew this was going to be the big year. The fiscal year 22 was going to be the hardest hitting year before it started to taper a little bit. Be a number of years before we hit the crossover point to come out of that increased effort and be able to pick that up as more normal expense. So the trap I'm trying not to fall in is, if we can just fix it for this year, we can turn our head and hope for better times next year. But this is the high year, so if we can make adjustments this year to help buffer that, maybe on a good track. So this graph, I wanted to give you a degree of magnitude because we've had the last meeting. It was posed: what if we reduce by X? What if we reduce by Y or Z? So this graph takes those same distribution of properties from $100,000 to $450,000. And it looks at, if we take the municipal and school budget as is in our budget books now in the tax rate calculation sheet, and I take $500,000 off the bottom line, you can see that $100,000 home, their impact is going to go from $31.58 to $9.19. If you went to $1 million, that $100,000 home is going to pay $13 less. $1.5 million off the bottom line, they're going to pay $35.59 less. $2 million off, they'll pay $57.98. So not being able to predict any level of reality to any of this, I just wanted to give you this graphic before you started your conversation tonight, so you could see what that does to these homestead exempt properties.
Steve,
See, for example, at $1 million, your crossover point is at the $125,000 mark. At $1.5 million, you cross over at the $150,000 mark. Just more.
Steve, so as I mentioned last week, I would love to put off the finalization of the municipal budget rather than make changes that we might not need to make if we get better results from Augusta on revenue sharing and a few other things. I actually ended up having to do something this afternoon, and I didn't get a chance to double check the charter, but I suspect that is allowed by charter to hold off the final decision from this board and from the city council on the final municipal budget. I'm not talking about the school, so that we can maximize what we're able to do next year. Because I really, I understand what we told our taxpayers. But obviously the assessment change has drastically skewed the numbers we showed them when we were selling those bonds. I'm not sure many of them would have agreed to a $300 annual, like one time, like the peak year being $300. I don't think a lot of people would have agreed with it. So we have to figure out a way to I'm not saying drop it all. I'm just saying we have to figure out a way to mitigate these rough years until we get back to something more reasonable and everybody kind of gets used to their new location in the tax hierarchy. And I guess I'm just throwing out, can we potentially work on the school, finish the school, get that to the taxpayers, and maybe meet again after your vacation and discuss the municipal budget?
Yes. And what I'd like to do for you tonight is, after I finish this presentation and you start working on discussing school and municipal budgets, Ronnie and I put together a spreadsheet of kind of the a la carte choices that looks at additional expenditures we'd like to have put in. We've got a positive reduction in the CIP that I can propose tonight. We have the potential change in municipal revenue sharing if it comes through at 5% instead of the 3.75. And then we have some proposed ways that we believe that we may be able to utilize the ARP funding, the American Recovery Plan funding, in order to offset currently incurred expenses, then carry that forward as an offsetting revenue for the next year, right? So since the Budget Committee is an extreme disadvantage from a time perspective, I'd like to entertain a discussion with you as you look at these items. That would be the what if. You would support this, and this if revenue sharing comes through, if we're able to use the ARP funding as proposed, as we think we may be able to. They haven't given us the final guidance on that, or really any. That you would support these various elements, but if none of that comes to be, you don't want it. You wouldn't recommend it as being part of the municipal. Okay.
Yep.
Right. All right. The next graphic here. Oh. Right, so this is the municipal calculation sheet. Again, I have the tax rate calculation sheet linked to all of this as you go forward and discuss tonight's budgets. So any questions as far as this information is concerned?
Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. Steve, thank you for that information. So this puts us into the item to take action if appropriate, which basically it's a discussion, open discussion for city council, excuse me, my apologies, budget committee members, and of course our resources are still here, city manager and superintendent, et cetera, to answer questions. So in terms of discussion, Moore has already laid out for us the option of basically, and I'm not saying this lightly, basically not to do anything. We see where we are, but we leave things open-ended. So I guess as I'm thinking this through, would this mean that the budget committee would come back? In other words, we would postpone this going to the city council. The budget committee might come back in, let's say, a month and finalize the municipal side of the budget, and then it would go to the city council? Or would the budget committee's work be done now and the final decisions would be made by the city council? How is that going to play out?
Councilor Stackpole, if I could suggest this. So I'd like to show you on the municipal side, the potential adjustments that we have at this point in time, and let you consider those, because it's a positive impact for us. It's seemingly from what the superintendent presented tonight versus what I'm going to present tonight. I think the school side is perhaps more known at this point in time. I don't know if that's a fair statement, Matt, as far as The reason I'm saying that, Matt, is I think, you know, your utilization of the ARP funding coming forward really is about the catch up and additional facilities, additional costs that's associated with that COVID impact on your student base and such under that. It really isn't going to change this year's request for your operating budget. Is that correct?
Yeah, that'd probably be fair assessment. Yes.
And I know on my side of the equation, if we can utilize ARP funding, as I think we may be able to, there's about an $800,000 positive impact there that I think changes the equation on the city side. If you take a look at how that plays in, and what you could potentially make for recommendations. So, would it be okay if I show that sheet right now?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Steve. Just as you're doing that, Matt, it was about was it? I'm sorry, $250,000 reduction you were proposing, Matt?
$226,447.
Okay, $225,000. All right, roughly. Yeah.
How come Cheryl didn't put the 89 cents on it this time?
We do like the 226,447 because that does get us to 1.7.
All right. Okay, is everybody seeing the spreadsheet on the screen now?
Yes.
Okay. So the way this is set up, if tonight you say yes, I put an X to that, and it starts to calculate our bottom line for us. So what this examines, so I've been listening to all of the comments. This goes to address, like Zendel had these comments, and I know others have as well. If you to add back the 2 firefighter EMS positions, that has a fiscal impact of $213,636. If you to add back the 2 dispatch positions, that's an impact of $179,630. That's the fully burdened. The grant writer position was very well presented this evening. If you want to add support and bring that back in, it's at $17,122. Ronnie gave me the number today, the increase in the county tax. We don't know what that is, but I remember the county administrator saying 0.28% net change to taxation is what he's predicting right now. We don't know, again, our valuation versus everybody else's valuation, but that would be an impact of $22.40. That was a new number. We went back and looked at the increase in utilities and petroleum because what's happened in the last 2 months scares the backside out of me. And Ronnie recalculated that at a new set point. It's a $50,000 impact. Agencies, the literacy volunteers has pulled their request for funding. They do not need it this year. So that's a $6,000 reduction on the side. On the capital improvement side, taxiway C, we believe that we can reduce that $100,000 request within the capital improvements program. We believe we can reduce that, eliminate it, because the positive news for the airport is they like to throw COVID money at airports. They did in the CARES Act, and they're throwing money at it again. So that we believe that not only will we won't have a need to call that out in the capital improvements program, but the $250,000 bond that was associated with that could get reduced down to 170. We're still seeking an answer on that, but I didn't carry that small number forward. We're carrying this recommendation of $100,000 reduction here. On the revenue side, if the revenue sharing goes from 3.75 to 5%, I put the numbers into the actual revenue sharing calculation sheet that the state used because I obtained a copy of that and can manipulate it now. It would be an additional $259,000. So that would come in as a revenue to reduce the overall taxation. And then as far as the American Recovery Plan, it specifically states in there that you can use it to offset incurred costs from COVID-19 and or revenues that were lost because of COVID-19. So we know we have PPE and safety amendments that we did, the plexiglass work and the spacing of the offices and such under that of $16,621. The Families First Corona Relief Act, the FFCRA, for which the private sector could take that from their payroll taxes to pay themselves back for that amendment to the Family Medical Leave Act time. We as a municipal employer could not. We incurred $137,415 in that category. We believe we should be able to reimburse ourselves for that. Lost and or delayed excise tax, we estimate that to be $303,000 for the time period that the Bureau of Motor Vehicle was closed. People could not perfect those transactions because of the inability to conduct their business with the state. FEMA qualified disaster expenses, we have filed, but we have heard nothing on that, nor do we anticipate hearing much of anything on that. We had $27,928 expense in there. We had a significant impact to the pay-as-you-throw. That's the solid waste stream, as well as the waste transfer fees, because of a reduction of people simply weren't out. The same level of economic activity was not there. We did not receive these funds. Therefore, we're booking the $210,727, the $73,696, and increased impacts to our general assistance because of the changes in the qualifications who qualified under COVID. We've incurred a much higher cost in general assistance this year, for which the state still is reimbursing us at 70%, but that increase that will not be reimbursed is an impact of $15,000. So if you were to take a look at what this does for you, if you supported implementing all of these elements, if they became a reality, you could see that you would increase your expense by a net of $356,000. You'd have offsetting revenues between revenue sharing and the use of the ARP funding of $1,043,000, and that would have a net change to the municipal side of the equation of $686,769. The lion's share of that, this $784,000, really is going to be dependent upon, can we utilize a portion of that $2.1 million, reimburse the municipality, and then give that back as tax relief because of the change in the revenue stream.
And Steve, long term about the positions, because these are adding 2 new positions. So I just want everybody, they probably are clear on this, but I just want to emphasize the point. So, and you may have a plan for this, but you've got funds for 1 year essentially to put those positions back in according to, I'm just going to call this a scheme. I don't mean that derogatory in any sense, the way you've got it laid out, which is very clear and very well done. But according to your scheme, you've got 1 year's worth of funding for these 2 positions. If we determine to put those back in, are we essentially inflating next year's budget by $300,000? I'm just looking at those 2, the firefighters and the dispatch position.
Right, this is going to be a continued carrying cost going forward.
Right.
Now we do have the ramp up in the dispatch contracts that's picking more of this expense up over the next 4 years, but it's not there yet.
Steve, so staffing wise, let's dispatch. We're looking at this builds it to 22, correct?
Correct.
We are currently at 8.
We're currently authorized and funded for 20.
And we're at 18.
We're at 18, and every penny of those 2 people that we don't currently have is being chewed up in overtime.
Okay.
Because you have to replace nearly 100% of that lost time.
So I know how dispatch works, because it's up, down, up, down, up, down with staff, right? Since we're not even funded we don't even have 20, what's the likelihood of getting to 22?
It's getting better because I'm going to make a staff change over there and change how it is that we train, who it is that's going to be doing the training and be dedicated to it full time. And then shifting that responsibility when they're not training. Because currently we train using on-service dispatchers.
Yeah.
Which is daunting at best.
Yep. So there's a meeting that's occurred since last week, I'm assuming?
I've been working on the administrative side of things. We also met with the fire units Monday night. I lose track of what month of the day it is. Yeah, it's past Monday night. That was an exceptionally strong meeting. For the first time, I've seen the fire group come together with, we know we need to make changes, we're ready to make changes, and they've established their own working group to standardize their run cards, consolidate on frequencies, and allow our dispatch center for the first time to put that into the CAD system and dictate back to them, we will dispatch to you, but these are the rules that you're going to operate under. They've always been our problem situation over there. They all wanted something different.
Yeah.
And they finally have said, we agree, detrimental to our long-term stability here. We need to standardize that. We had a great group of fire chiefs there that have committed to it. And Rod Hooper, the fire marshal for the York County, is facilitating that. He's coordinating the group.
I can't actually believe you got the frequency conversation to go in a positive direction. It's great. I know that's been a significant problem. So, okay. Yeah, because as we talk about funding for different locations. So that's for dispatch. What about, one of the members of the budget committee last week asked about overtime in the fire department. And I mentioned that it's unlikely to change because the way the fire contract is written, if you get to 12, you fill to 11. If we're at 11, we fill to 10. So there's still that only one jump down, which requires that actually is what can cause overtime expenses. Is there, and are we, I don't want to really get into it because that's a contract negotiation issue, but that is one of those things that it would be nice to see as a potential reduction, to see some overtime reduction because there is more flexibility in the fill to position in talking with the firefighters. So I'm just going to throw that out as well. So
there will be some overtime reduction there. We'll have to go back and re-examine that. If it's considered to put these two positions in, I'll commit to go back to re-examining the offset that we can take out of overtime because of this. So this not only addresses the staffing issue overall, as well as when you drop down one, when they drop down two, they call back in and replace one. This also addresses the long-term outages that are inherent within the fire department service. They have to be 100% to come back. They tear a shoulder up, something of that nature. They can't come back with an arm in a sling. They can't do life rescue with just one arm. So they tend, more than any other public safety department we have, they tend to be out longer. So an outage there, either workplace or non-workplace related injuries, impacts us far more greatly than anywhere.
All right, those are my questions. I just want to make sure everything's out in the open, and those are the two questions I had for dispatch and fire. And I agree. I think Lee made a very good presentation on the grant writer position.
All right, Councilor Hanselman, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Steve, this is fun, and I've kind of played with the numbers myself, but for the benefit of folks to see one scenario, and I'm guessing others might want to have a chance to do the same thing, could you do me a favor and remove the yes next to the 5 positions at the top of the screen? So remove and then remove the revenue sharing as well. The increase, So if we didn't get revenue sharing and didn't add positions back, we'd be looking at a reduction of 838 roughly.
Again, that's all predicated on being able to use the American Recovery Plan in that way. And so if everybody's noticed this little box I've put over here called the cliff, right? That $784,000 won't be there in a subsequent year.
But hopefully
I have to make that up.
Right. But also we hope that our excise tax bounces back, and you know what I mean, and also that some of those expenses are there as well. So thank you. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I think as we go through this process, committee members, we saw the graph. We see the bump this year. Again, take evaluations out of the equation for just a minute for point of discussion. We knew that bump was coming, and we also know there's another bump coming next year. Okay, so just trying to keep things in perspective here. I know there are things we all want to do, and I'm just kind of keep things in perspective, okay? So going back to what I'd like to do at this point is kind of is to poll the members of the committee. You can say that you know, you're not in favor of. I'm going to ask in favor of the budget as it has been presented right now. In other words, not doing anything. I think later, after we have a little bit of discussion here, we can also discuss the aspect of delaying it. I'd still like to get some clarification over who's going to make the final, you know, just take the budget committee out of the loop if we kick the can, so to speak. I think we need to know that before we do that. And Andy, okay, your hand's down now. So, and then if we decide, we come to some conclusion over the bottom line number, and we're comfortable with that, then we can certainly entertain motions to finalize the bottom line numbers, which essentially then, in the long term, set the mill rate. And that would conclude our business for this year. We do have another night, and so we can meet again next Thursday. I would suspect, because there wouldn't be any significant additional presentations, that would be a fairly quick meeting. Basically a discussion once again among committee members, or maybe we postpone that on the municipal side for a while. We have room. We have another week, even in relation to the schools. Is that right? We can wait another week for the schools and not affect their referendum process. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay,
yes.
so we've got another week, but we would need to finish at least the school portion next Friday night. So hopefully you've put a little. I guess I'm gonna start out just to get the ball rolling and qualify everything that I say as chair. None of this is written in stone. These are my ideas or my thinking. I don't really have any ideas, but this is my thinking, and I'm certainly open to any suggestions or changes that other budget committee members have. Just kind of to stating where I am. Clearly, what's going to happen here this evening is going to be dictated by the entire budget committee. It's certainly not going to be dictated by me, but I'll get the ball rolling, so to speak. So right now, with the proposed reductions that we have, I'm ready to. Well, we've got the proposed reductions in that I was thinking about. So I go back to what the city manager said, and I repeated it at the end of last week's budget committee, that this right now represents our worst case scenario. It may get a little bit better than this, but I think this week we're closer to reality in terms of the impact of this budget. I believe that this year is not a year for new positions, and I'm not specifically speaking to either the grant writer position. I think that's up for debate, but I'm speaking to the dispatch positions and the fire positions. I just don't feel that this is a year for new positions. And so with the discussion around the addition, we also have the 6,000 again, this is not much money to move around and decide what we want to do with in terms of the grant writer position, and we also have the $6,000 reduction from the literacy people. So basically, I'm ready to look at this, examine the bottom line, and what the city manager does. He comes up with we can break it out, bottom line, schools and city, or we can look at a bottom line for the entire budget and then take a vote on it. I just don't feel that this is the time for new positions. We are trying to curb that bump in the tax rate. That's what I'm hearing. You know, that this is a big year for an increase, and we're trying to lower that as much as we can, and also realize that we've got another bump coming next year. And I think we have a budget that does that, or significantly helps with that bump, and does not damage programs, which is another thing we need to consider, that this doesn't damage any programs. No one's losing their job. We're not cutting back any services, et cetera. And I guess I need to qualify that by saying the part-time grant writer is an existing position that we would not be funding next year. So that technically is someone losing their job. But in general, we're not laying off teachers, we're not laying off firefighters, we're not laying off city workers, this just isn't the time to do that. Everybody knows that. That's not where we necessarily want to go. So maybe I haven't said it as eloquently maybe as I could. That's kind of where I'm at. I'm ready to examine the final numbers here and move ahead with this. With that, who would like to speak? I guess I'll ask for hands. Do those hands real quick, and I'll try to do them in order of you put your hands up. But I would like to hear from everybody at this point on the budget committee. No volunteers to go next? All right, Becky, brave Becky, go ahead.
I would say that the school committee has done their job, well over their job. I'm very impressed with what they presented tonight. I didn't even think they could cut any more, and yet they did. So I think that's very respectful on their part. So tonight I would be ready to say, let's pass the school budget with the job that they have done. I do have some concerns about dispatch and the firefighters, but Bob, I also understand what you're saying. Maybe this year isn't the year to be adding those positions. So I would like further discussion on that part, because I could go either way on that. But I think the school, it would be great if we could just set the school thing aside and say, you're done, and let's focus on the city side.
Okay. Next brave person. All right, I guess I have to pick on some. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, so I'm assuming that there's nothing new regarding any of those funds. I'm assuming that would affect this. No new knowledge is going to come by next week that would affect the school's budget that might free up additional money, correct? I mean, I think that's kind of the gist. I calculated from last week, looking at some of the language in the Recovery Act, that I think at the soonest, maybe 90 days funds might be seen, or maybe even up to 120 at the latest. So I'm not sure any new funds. So I'm going to echo kind of what Becky had said. I think the school board or the school department came back, and Matt Nelson's presentation, they did find an additional, $250,000 roughly out of their budget, which I think is, pretty impressive. So I think I'd be ready to kind of table and to kind of move on with the school department's side, and then maybe bring up some more discussion on the city side.
Okay, Matt, you have any? If we waited a week, Matt. I don't know if he's hearing me. You hearing me, Matt? Yeah. If we waited a week, do you anticipate that would be any change if we waited till next Thursday night to approve the school committee budget?
I think there's a possibility. I haven't been led to believe that there's going to be any new information or anything coming, but so I don't think so. But at the end of the day, I also, I don't. all the information I've been led to believe doesn't have me believe we're waiting for any announcement anymore, coming back with any more information. There could be information coming from the Maine Department of Education that's talking about some of those summer learning programs, the evidence-based, those types of things that are coming in. So there is information we're coming. How much it would impact our funding, I really don't know.
Okay. So do we need to all chip in and buy you a couple more rolls of Tums if you got to sit on this for another week?
No, we just call it Thursday, right? I mean, that's the way it's been.
All right. Okay. Who's next?
I will say, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, there is no school tomorrow at MCS school. We did have an issue with the sewer and water that I've been dealing with throughout tonight's meeting. So no school at MCS school tomorrow in case there's anybody watching there.
All right. Thanks. Anybody else?
Chair, I don't mind jumping in.
Go ahead.
I know people probably getting sick of hearing from me.
Yeah, well, I think the more they hear from other people, then they'll be able to firm up their thoughts. But go ahead. This is difficult. I know it's difficult, but go ahead.
So from my perspective, and first I just want to share a small tidbit perspective, right? I heard a great commentary on a radio show that when we have very little feels like a lot to us. And when we have a lot, very little doesn't feel like much to us. In other words, if I have 50 cans of food in my pantry and somebody gives me 2, that 2 doesn't really feel like a big deal. But if I have 2 cans of food in my pantry and somebody gives me 2 more cans, that feels significant to me. So I just want to keep that perspective, right? And that's the perspective that's really driving my approach to this year's budget process. So that being said, like I said, I'm really appreciative of what the school department's done. I feel like I could get behind the school department budget and move that forward tonight. I'm concerned about 2 things. One, and I don't know how we best talk about it, but is there a concern that if we don't finalize the municipal budget and we push the school budget forward, that the community won't have enough information to vote and support the school budget come June? Does that question make sense? Meaning, or will we put efforts forward, or we have our final product in time to make sure we're communicating it with our taxpayers and citizens so they feel comfortable voting on the school referendum, or are we doing like a disservice? And this just came to me, I'm like, oh no, what if we don't get support for our school budget because we haven't finalized our city budget? Because I would prefer not to move the municipal budget forward, or I prefer to move it forward at the budget committee level, knowing that the council will do further work on it. But I'm not ready to finalize the municipal budget.
Okay.
Does that question make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would turn to my opinion, and I'm going to ask the superintendent for his opinion in just a second. They're going to do certain things to promote their budget. They always do. And I don't think that this, the city side really don't do that much to promote the school budget. That's their thing. I mean, we support it, we talk about it, but it's, we don't really discuss it at city council meetings and so on and so forth. So I guess turn this to Matt and say, do you see that would have a negative effect, or you're just going to go about your normal things that you do on an annual basis, get the information about your budget out? Also, before I let you finish, are there things that we could do on the city side that could help you, like do a presentation at a city council meeting or something?
So we will continue to do all of what we normally do to be able to go and promote our budget, to get support and to educate and to be able to do that. So that won't change in our end for that. Obviously, I don't want to speak for the other voters. I think Ann brings up a good point that they may want to be able to look at things in totality. They don't get a chance to vote on the city budget. And that's always a concern I've had, that, we've heard this in budget committee meetings years ago, where people said sometimes they'll vote when they get a chance to ask, and they might sometimes be against the school budget if there's some uncertainty with the city. So I don't know in terms of that. I don't know what your timeline is. I thought things would be done. I thought we were just delaying for short term, that come June, I think we would be all set, or is it still going to be uncertain come June?
Steve, Steve, what would your perspective could be on a time frame for the city to have their budget completed, pending information from Augusta?
As was reported on the news, they're supposed to have the state budget voted out by next Friday. So we would know revenue sharing at that point. And then it's a matter of getting the rulemaking and the outcome of that on the ARP plan communicated to us as to the municipal level. My understanding is they've paid less attention to that. That was one of the lesser popular pieces amongst many, especially the Republican side of the ticket at the federal level, about the municipal distribution, the county municipal distribution. So less is known about our ultimate utilization of that. But this is our current understanding, what I presented tonight.
But you know, and that sounds to me like a delay of at least a week in terms of municipal revenue sharing could be beneficial to the decision-making process here.
If they vote that out before your next meeting,
we would Thursday,
yeah.
Okay, and I guess my sense is that once we have, I mean, those are the two pieces of information: the use of the funds and municipal revenue sharing. If we could tie that up, let's say over the next 2 weeks, I think we could move ahead with the municipal budget. You think that would be unrealistic, Steve? 2 weeks from tonight?
No, I don't think that's unrealistic at all. I'm just trying to grab the calendar here.
Well, while Steve's grabbing that, because I'm not sure I was clear, I got a tickle and could barely talk and breathe at the same time. But on the city side, I do not support the addition of positions, and I'd like to see that $800,000 reduction in net to taxation between the adjustments that I looked at. You know, I was really serious about that $1 million. The school brought us a good chunk of the way there, and I'd like to see the city bridge the gap on that. So that's where I'm at personally.
Okay, thank you for that. So I'm just going to go to my next row, and first person in my next row is Jace Clark. Are you comfortable speaking about this, Jace?
Yes. So when Councilor Hanselman had mentioned the $1 million number, I actually agreed that that was a pretty good amount. With these, it brings us down to that. So the only way I'd be able to support the new positions is if we were able to offset the cost of those positions elsewhere, because especially that means in future years we're always going to have to deal with that, additional costs, and so unless we're able to offset it, I just can't see agreeing to it.
Okay. Anything else? Is that pretty much it?
And I'm also okay with pushing out the municipal budget for a couple of weeks if we have to.
Okay. And how do you feel about the school budget? Are you comfortable with that, or?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Jace. Moving along, it would be Wes.
Sure. So I am comfortable with the changes that the superintendent made today to the school budget. I'm comfortable with moving forward with that. I do agree with, waiting on the municipal side and see what happens. Obviously, the grant writer position made a wonderful case for that money. So that's something I believe we should look at. I'm not, and in past years when we've done this, when we talk about specific positions per se, I kind of like to leave that up to the superintendent and the city manager. They build those budgets, and to me, it's more comfortable voting on the entire budget than looking and saying, we'll take this position, put this position in, take this one out. So I'm open to discussion on that, but hopefully that was clear. But for the school budget, I'm ready to go. And if we need to wait on the municipal, I think we can still talk about options for what that funding looks like.
Okay. And last but not least, Councilor Hurley.
For the most part, I'm agreeing with what everybody said here. A couple of questions. There's been some talk at the city council level, and I don't know if this is a great place to put it up. I could see, because literacy gave up theirs, and they are, I've talked to them, they are tenants of mine, and they are planning on making some probably good changes for their program to better reach the public. And I think they made some very smart decisions on why they could request, they could say to us, but you can reduce this by 6,000. So I think it was very thoughtful. When you look at the other organizations that we fund in this manner, and have others made adjustments? Do they need less city funding? I'm gonna throw out the Chamber of Commerce. I mean, we give more money to the Chamber of Commerce than any other business within the community, and typically even a city only pays a membership fee and doesn't pay over and above that. And I believe if we were not funding them at more than the level of the very reduced rent they receive, they practically pay no rent for their location, which is fine, and then pay them based on our employee base, we would probably have enough to bridge the gap for the grant writer position, which is a very important position for the community. And there would be, it would be a nice balance between what literacy has given back and what we could get from other adjustments with, did the Chamber of Commerce receive PPP money? Did they receive monies to help them through this year? I mean, some of these things, other organizations could help us bridge the gap for the taxpayer. So, and as far as anything else, I agree with you. I think the school budget is probably ready to move forward. Who knows, maybe there will be some more beneficial stuff coming down from Augusta. We'll be able to even give, right, Matt? Maybe it might come along that they get even more money that is going to not be a cliff level addition, and we can further reduce the net taxation from the school side. But for now, I think, there's been some good work done on the school side. I hate to think that we have to make cuts on the city side. I'd like to try to find the balance of the net taxation change in unique and unusual ways. So I'm pretty much on everybody else's side on the other issues. So there you go.
Okay. Just one quick question on the literacy position. Is that a 1 year? I don't know if you can help me out, Steve. Is that a 1 year? We don't need the money this year because of COVID, when our services are down or whatever. Are they going to come back and ask for that 6,000 next year, or are they actually reducing their services so they don't need the 6,000, or changing their services as more? So
they're making some holistic changes, so I think it's going to be. It could go either way.
Okay. All right.
What did you say, Steve?
Yeah, my interpretation was that was going to be a long-term change. I don't know if Ronnie has a different impression from the narrative they submitted or not, but that because of how they're going to change on the delivery of this services and how they're going to reach people and provide the educational resources.
They pay rent to me now, Bob, and they might not be paying rent to me within a few months.
Yeah.
How's that?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, but it does sound like 50-50, and I'm not. I'm not anything. It does sound like it might be 50-50. And look, $6,000 in the grand scheme of things is little potatoes, but we may have to put it back in. I just try to make that aware. So I think what you suggested is a good idea, Maura, and let's something that we can consider and work on it over time. Becky, you have your hand up. Jason, I don't know if you have your hand up or not, or you forgot to put it down.
Jason.
I can't hear you. You're muted.
Yeah, I forgot to put it down. I thought I meant put it down when I get acknowledged. Okay. I apologize.
Yeah, that's okay. That's all right. No problem. So Becky, you're up.
After hearing what people have said, and because I like to get stuff off my plate, I at this time would like to make a motion to accept the school committee, the school budget as presented tonight.
Okay, that's a motion. It will need a second.
I'll second that.
I think, Jason, did you have your mic? Did you second that, Jason?
No, I was waiting for a second.
So. All right, so Ann has the second. Discussion. The only thing I would like is if you could put up the final numbers for us, or somebody could calculate that while we're having our discussion here, so we can look at what the bottom line numbers are here.
What?
Is that with the use of the 226? That with the reduction of the 226,447, or without that reduction?
I believe it's with the 226,000, et cetera, amount. Speak up if I'm not right in what your intention is.
Yes, that's my intention.
Okay. All right. Okay. So if somebody could kind of spin those numbers for us, we'll and throw them up on a spreadsheet. We know you like to do that, Mr. Buck. So, or maybe Matt's going to do it. I don't know. We need an amount to vote on, is what I'm getting at.
Matt, I'm just going to reduce the expense here.
Well, it's a combination of different things with that, right? Cheryl, do you have an idea of how we're going to break that out?
Well, without getting into the breakout, let me just do it on the bottom line for taxation, okay? That's the easiest way to do it, and that's the way I planned on doing it tonight. So if we just take off back to my number again.
So what's confusing is these numbers are usually, the numbers are usually stacked, and we vote on a bottom line for both city and in school. So we're breaking it out. So it's going to be, we'll get to it, but it's going to be a little bit more confusing to do it this way. All right.
Steve, this is Ronnie. Can you go back to the expense side and back out on the school side? On the school side, back out 50,831 out of debt.
Out of debt?
Yep.
Actually, no, that's a use of carryover. That 50,831.
In your outline, you had it as a reduction to debt.
Is that additional revenue?
Okay, so that's supposed to be a reduction in your revenue?
Increase in revenue, because we're going to use carryover.
And then the 74,328 and the 101,288 are both reductions in the expense?
Yep, and that's $175,616.
All right, so take it off that line in education, Steve.
Okay, so you might have said those numbers too quick. What do you need? What do you need for a reduction?
So for expense, you're going to subtract 175,616.
And then go to the revenue screen under debt.
And change that 20,306 number.
Which number?
The 20,306.
Under carry forward, down below.
Line number 20.
Yep. And add $50,831. That's good.
Okay, so do we have a bottom line number for the school budget?
You have to go back to the expense tab.
$56,105,833 would be the expense.
Okay, and Becky, however you want to do this, I think we need to add that number to your motion, that you're moving to approve the school budget at whatever it was, the 58,000 number.
Is it 58 or 56?
56.
$56,105, $105,833.
Right.
Exactly what Steve said.
Okay. All right. So that's part of our motion. And that has been seconded. So we will now do a roll call vote on that motion. Councilor Hanselman?
Yes.
Councilor Hurley?
Yes.
Becky Brink?
Yes.
Jason Rice?
Yes.
Jason Clark,
Yes.
Wesley Davy,
Yes.
and I am also a yes. So the school budget for, what is it, 21, 22, has been completed. So I guess we don't need to, excuse me, get Matt those Tums for the week. Yes.
Can you also have your committee vote on their capital plan, please?
Oh, the school capital plan. Yeah. Okay. So let's figure out the number first, and then we'll have a motion, and we can include the number in the motion right up front.
That
I'd
is
like
the
to make a
number.
motion to approve the school capital plan in the amount of $333,975.
Second,
Okay, everybody all around in agreement that those are the correct numbers. This is it. This is, if it's too low, we messed up. I mean, correct in terms of what's been presented. I guess it's correct. All right, roll call vote, been moved and seconded. Sorry, discussion, any discussion on this?
Who seconded it? Was that?
Becky
Becky,
did.
did you second? Thank you,
Becky, yeah, you made the motion, Maura, correct?
Yes, I did.
Okay, Becky.
Because I knew what it was, so I knew I could make it.
Good. So this is hearing no discussion. Here is a roll call vote. Councilor Hanselman,
Yes.
Councilor Herlihy,
Yes.
Becky Brink,
Yes.
Jason Rice,
Yes.
Jace Clark,
Yes.
Wesley Davy,
Yes.
and I'm also a yes. So just going to ask, does that conclude the school business? I'm just making sure we got everything covered.
If you could vote on the school revenue, that'd be the last piece of this budget.
Okay. All right. So are there any calculations that need to be done on this?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the revenue for the school in the amount of $40,650,284. Is that good, guys?
Okay. Yeah.
Second.
Okay. Yeah. So same people. Maura made the motion and Becky seconded it. And I'm just going to ask, as part of the discussion, is that the correct amount that's in there?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. That's in the motion, I mean. All right. Moving on, we'll do a roll call vote. Councilor Hanselman,
Yes.
Councilor Herlihy,
Yes.
Becky Brink,
Yes.
Jason Rice,
Yes.
Jace Clark,
Yes.
Wesley Davy,
Yes.
and I'm also a yes, so that's also a unanimous vote. Okay, before we move on to the city side, I can take a look at the clock. It's 8 o'clock. So we're not doing too badly in terms of time, and certainly we are getting things done here. Is there anything else we need to do on the school side of the budget equation? All right, it sounds to me like our work for them is complete at this point. And so, yep.
I think that's primarily because they have better numbers to use. I don't think there's anything negative to be said on the school side.
Absolutely. I don't mean any slight in any way. It's complicated on both sides. It's entirely possible, if we could wait another month for the schools, these numbers might improve. They might get worse. I don't know. But if we could wait, but we really can't wait. We need to move these along. And I think we're all comfortable that this is probably the best case scenario at this point. And so I would say, good work to all of us tonight in getting this done. And of course, there's a sense of relief on the school side once their budget is done also. Lets them move on to other things that they can think about. Okay, so we've had the discussion around the city. Before we have a motion, and that's what I'm going to ask for in just a minute. can we get some clarification in moving forward? How long does the budget committee, how long are we able to hang on to this before we need to send it either by charter or whatever to the city council?
We need to set the
presentation is
date.
April 6th. April 6th, Ronnie, for presentation to the council.
April 6th is what we have on the calendar to present to the city council, and that's because, I'm sorry, I thought I was on mute. Because the school committee needs to have the ballot information to Sue Cody by April 9th.
Okay, so the April 6th is essentially a kind of artificial date. I mean, we could move that along roughly a couple of weeks or something like that, and not interfere with the process.
Not for the school piece.
No, the school piece is done. School piece is done, Steve, at this point.
Right, but it needs to be presented to the city council, and the city council needs to authorize that, so vote that number. Then we can put that forward for the referendum information.
Okay. All right.
Fill that process. You can make a recommendation to table the city side of it pending whatever, but not the school.
Okay. All right. So that helps. That's clear. But there's no reason why at the city council level we couldn't go ahead with just discussing the city council on April 6th and not discuss the city at this point.
Sorry, you mean just discuss the school department?
Yeah.
You said city twice, that's all.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We hold that April 6th date, but it's just for the schools so that they can move their referendum ahead.
What's the likelihood, city, based on what you're hearing, Steve, what's the likelihood the state will actually approve a budget?
All I know is what I heard on the news, that they anticipated being able to vote that out by the end of next week.
Do we know if the revenue sharing increase is solid in there, or is it weak?
Well, it was voted out of taxation at an 8-3.
Okay.
And it is the deeds control everything down there. So if they're supporting that, likely it would muster enough votes to stay in the budget.
All right. So, I think we're pretty clear on how to proceed. What I'm going to say is on the city side, we decide to maybe, again, I'll turn to Steve again. Is it better to just postpone, or is it better to say we're going to meet in 2 weeks? To have a hard date, or is it better just postpone and somehow we pull ourselves together? I know it's better to have a hard date for everybody planning to do this, but is it better to postpone until we feel we have the best information, or come up with a hard date, or do both, have a hard date and then postpone it if we need to?
In an attempt to answer that, I'm going to share back here the city budget adjustments. This is what I'm hearing so far. The reinstallation of the part-time grant writer, county tax. You don't have an issue. You don't have a choice on that, but we are estimating that. I haven't heard a yay or nay as far as the petroleum change, literacy volunteer. We know we can take that $6,000 out. Chamber, if that funding is not in there, if you're going to combine those two to offset the grant writer position, so I've added that in here.
What's our membership fee? I wouldn't want it to go all the way down. Have a membership fee, Steve. Just keep that in mind.
Okay.
I don't think it's that bad, but I just wanted to throw that out. Okay.
Tax the CIP, $100,000. We're reasonably sure that can go away. And then you have use down here. So if you implemented all of these elements that have the X in it, there's $834,000 there. So combine that with the school, you get to your $1 million goal.
So if we got revenue sharing, is there anything that's really uncomfortable for you? The cliff pieces in the bottom section?
Well, if you get the revenue sharing, the 259 would not be part of your cliff, right? Because it would be dependent upon the state's economy at that point in time. So as long as the state's economy in the subsequent year was at least as good as this coming year, this ensuing year, there'd be no cliff element here. The reason I call this 784 the cliff, because that's all utilization of the ARP funds. That's a one-time gig.
So Steve, I'm getting some information that the budget being voted on next week does not include an increase to revenue sharing. Was there a change that you haven't heard about, possibly?
No, I hadn't heard one way or the other. All I knew was it reported out of taxation, but they did say on the news, and that's what miffed me, was that they were moving forward with voting in the same budget as prior year, which would not have an increase for revenue sharing.
Okay.
Okay, so we still have work to do on the city side, clearly. We're not there yet, but I think we're making good progress. I'm going to suggest that we probably shouldn't meet next Thursday, but potentially the next Thursday, which would be what, the 8th? If we're council meeting is the 6th, would be the 8th, and this would be a budget committee meeting.
Can we verify there are no vacations that are going to impact some of the meeting schedules? Because I know tons of people take vacations or take breaks. And
Yep.
The new COVID term is take a break in April before we set a date.
Yeah, well, also, I think people tend to take breaks when the budget's done. Also, I mean, you know, it takes the pressure off a little bit. So now it's time for a break. So yeah, I think that's a very fair question. Is that going to interfere that anyone knows of with getting the right people here to discuss these proposals or actions that we may take?
Just a question. Does the budget committee join us at the April 6th council meeting as well? I'm just worried about people's time that week.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
Budget committee presents, Ann.
So we'd be asking them to meet twice that week.
We would. However, if we go by what happened last year, and I don't have to speak to this, but typically I review the numbers. City council asks questions, generally, not typically of me as chair, but of the city manager and maybe Ronnie, things like that. You know, drilling down a little bit, and then they take a vote. So other than the time commitment, budget committee members, it's not a heavy load. You don't have to do necessarily a lot of thinking or interaction at that. You're welcome to, of course, but you don't have to. It's one of those. Sometimes I say you can sit there and watch the show. You don't have to really dig in to participate that much. But if that's an issue for you, please speak up. That we may be meeting Tuesday. You don't have to stay for the whole city council meeting. We may be meeting Tuesday for an hour or so, and then coming back on Thursday to finalize the city budget. Okay, so I guess I'm gonna make a motion that we table the city budget, table the discussion on the city budget until, again, I believe it's April 8th. And we'll follow the same format Thursday at 6 o'clock. I believe at this point, well, we'll have to have some updated information on the agenda. So we'll have to have some brief presentations or a brief presentation by the city manager and then discussion. And we decide what we're going to do. I mean, we may say we don't have enough information. We'll move it down a little bit longer. I think, we're in kind of a no man's land. I've certainly haven't, I don't have a problem with this, but I certainly haven't approached it before. We've always held to those hard and fast deadlines. So this is a little bit different way to do it. But I think it's totally appropriate. As we can see, although we're narrowing this down, there's a lot of money floating around out there. And I don't necessarily mean within our community. There's a lot of money floating around there. And I do think as best we can. We have the responsibility to make sure we have the best budget that we can for the community. I think we've done that with the schools, and we need to continue to do that on the city side. So I don't want to say as long as it takes, but if it takes us a little while longer to get it right, I'm all in favor of doing that. So I make that motion that we table the discussion on the city budget until April 8th, Thursday, April 8th. And we would need a second to move ahead with that.
Second.
And that's Becky seconding it. Is there any discussion? And please feel free to discuss this and say, I got a better idea.
I hate to throw a wrinkle.
I'd love to have a better idea. Go ahead, Councilor Hanselman. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, would one possibility be recognizing the time of our volunteer budget committee to make a recommendation to move a municipal budget to the council level, for the council then to further work with Steve on finalizing? Meaning, could we make a recommendation to reduce the city's expenditures by $800,000 and move that forward to the council for future work? And maybe I look to folks who know the charter and the rules better than I do. Maura, do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, that's perfectly reasonable. If the budget committee doesn't want to work on it anymore, but if they'd like to have one more look at it after the state has done their work, it's not a bad precedent to have, is to make sure we get the best numbers possible before making that final recommendation. If you don't have a state budget by the 8th, that might be this decision to make.
Yeah, I mean, my preference right now would be to keep the budget committee involved. I mean, they're vested, they're here, they've spent a lot of time on it. I think they would like to see this come to a conclusion and have input into that conclusion. Correct me if I'm wrong, ladies and gentlemen, but I'd like to see them stay involved. I think we can reassess. We can reassess that at any time. We can reassess that on the 8th, and so on and so forth. I tell you what I will do though, because I think respecting their time is important, and they are all volunteers. So going back to the meeting on the 6th, let me say that for budget committee members, you're welcome, but it's optional. Okay, if you don't want to participate, or you don't want to sit in on it, okay, and you want to watch the stream at another time, so on and so forth, you're welcome to do that. So I'm going to lift kind of the requirement that you need to be there. You're all welcome, but if you want to go fishing or something like that, then go fishing. Okay, I think that helps with the workload also.
I think it's funny we've made these comments and we actually haven't asked the volunteers what Jason, Wes, Jace, and Becky what their opinion is.
Yeah, well, I thought I was sort of doing that all along and giving them an opportunity to speak. But yeah, I mean, I'll open it up to. I mean, we have discussion on the motion. There's been a motion to do that. It's been seconded. Discussion on the motion. As I said, what do you think? Are we on the right path here or not? You can hold your thumb up if you want to, or you can speak, whatever you'd like to do. Okay, Wes?
Yeah, so from my standpoint, it's not a problem for me to attend on the 6th and then again on the 8th. That's not. So, and I would like to be involved in more of the discussion on the city budget if possible, so.
Yeah. But I mean, I can see it, again, we'll reassess along the way, but if it's another week after that, my feeling is I want you guys to, ladies and gentlemen, to continue to be involved as close as we can get to the end also. So Ann Hanselman put her thumb up. So I get a thumbs up from her. Got a thumbs up from Becky, thumbs up from Jace. Wesley has spoken. Jason, you thumbs up on all this or? Yep. Okay. All right. Okay. That was discussion on the motion. So we have a motion to table here. It's been seconded. So let's go through the roll call vote. First up is Councilor Hanselman.
Yes.
Councilor Herlihy.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Becky Brink.
Yes.
Jason Rice,
Yes.
Jace Clark,
Yes.
Wesley Davy,
Yes.
and I am also a yes. And I think given some of the unknowns, I want to, it's sort of an apology, but I just want to get this out there. I think it was at the last meeting. I made a statement, and this is just my reflection on what I said. I made a statement that I felt like we were playing pin the tail on the donkey. You know, we had blinders on and we were trying to pin the tail on the donkey. What I was speaking to at that time was our revenue situation. And I do think the revenue situation, particularly going back to last week, was much more scrambled eggs than it was this week. I was not talking about the work that the city manager and the city has done. They've done an excellent job, and same thing for the schools. So I didn't want that statement or whoever was watching to think, oh, I think everybody did a lousy job and has left us in a kind of no man's land where we're trying to pin the tail on the donkey. That was not my intent. I thought about it and I said, yeah, that was not a very wise thing to say. So I was speaking about the revenue situation, not about the work that the different facets, the city and the schools had done. So I just want to get that out there. All right. Is there any other action that we need to take this evening? Yes, Steve.
I was going to give you the opportunity to take a look if, let me share the screen again. Because I know the goal was to get another $800,000 out of the budget, either through the reduction of expense, combination of changing the expense and or utilization of the ARP funds. So if I take another $800,000 just off the bottom line here, just a moment. All right, and we take a look at what that does for us.
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, that was the other thing that was on my mind. Unfortunately, this is part of the business. We don't want to lower taxes too much so that we're building in an artificial jump on top of a jump next year. So yeah, go ahead, Steve. I'm glad you.
Yeah, so adjusting that graph, the $100,000 property card drops by $14.38. Coming up to the middle of the road, the $225,000 goes up by $149. 175,000 up by 208. Got an abnormally in here. There's 275 to 300 because they saw a larger change in the market price last time. There's less of a change there this time. So they're at 202. They're the lucky people. Just the way that category averaged out. Then the highest, the $450,000 home, see a change of $344, 4%.
Okay,
Does this more closely reflect the dollar values we estimated for 2022 when we were giving the information for the bonds? It does, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm looking at, I probably should go to the next percentage higher, but look at my house, and just so everybody knows, my house is almost 120 years old. It's in good shape. It's well built. I'm downtown on Summer Street. I'm a stone's throw from Hannaford Shopping Center. Walk down the hill from my house, we're at number 1 Pond. So it's kind of a classic downtown house. It's not real fancy. Still got 60s era aluminum siding on it. Things like that. But it's a nice, comfortable house for my family. No complaints. So if I did some estimating earlier, and looking at the 200, and these are kind of small numbers here, but looking at the 200 to 50 to 250 range, which my house could be assessed at 200,000. I don't have my tax bill right here in front of me because I just gave it to my wife. But I was more at the 6% range. Maybe like 6.5, even under the old scenario. And now we're dropping. Is it 370 or 3%? I can't read the percentage.
3.7%. This
Bob,
is a
you're currently at
$255,000.
$195. Bob's currently at $195 for valuation. His house would probably sell over $250 now. So if actually that adjustment does get made, you could be looking, you'd be taking the hit from the increase plus the value increase.
Right. So I was coming up with, again, this is just roughly looking, I got my tax numbers in my head. So I put my taxes together. I think I took 6%. It may have been more than that. I came up with $259 annually. Okay. So, you know, that's $20 a month. So that's kind of a larger increase than I remember getting in the past. Usually it's around $10 or something like that. So yeah, I'm aware of that. Fortunately, you know, I'm in a position that's not going to take food out of my mouth or anything like that to pay $20 more a month. All that aside, this seems to me that it would drop it down more in the typical range of maybe an increase of 10, 12, possibly $15 a month. You know, and you're going to multiply that by 12. So almost in half. And that, of course, is in the bar of the three greatest increases. So, you know, I think we're pretty close to having a good budget. And of course, just go there. The dirty little secret of the budget is you don't want to cut too much, because then you got to make that up again next year. You know, if we lowered everybody's down below what they were paying now, you come back next year, they got to get us back to where we are, plus whatever the increase is. And so you set up a scenario where taxes skyrocket again next year. And I think we need to be well aware of that. We're still way above that threshold, but just want to point that out also, that we need to be aware that there is a potential then for causing a problem by cutting taxes too low. And I'm sure I'm going to get slammed on Facebook and all over the place for saying that, but you know, you've got to have a fairly level trend line here and not jump up, down, up, down. That's when people really get upset about the whole process. So, all right. Anything else? I probably should be quiet.
I think we have to give, Steve has his hand up.
I'm digging a hole for myself here, but go ahead, Ann.
We have to give Steve and Ronnie big kudos for their PowerPoint with great colors. So it really did look good. And to Maura's point, Steve, it was easier to see than some of the other color schemes we've used. So thank you for that effort.
We'll send that out to the whole committee. It was in production today, so we'll send it out to the whole committee. So, Bob, if you want me to pick on you, I can tell you what your evaluation was last year and what it's going to be this year.
Go ahead. You get it out there. That's fine. I don't mind. If I know this is not typically really public information, but I don't mind. Go ahead, lay it out there for me.
Well, actually, it is. The public can look it up, but so
can't win.
Yeah, no, you can't. So last year it was valued at $195,000. Single family, conventional. The new valuation would be $202,000. Change in valuation of $7,000 or 4%.
So my biggest concern with that is based on what I'm seeing for sale. And you know, George might be making a wise move here. But based on what I'm seeing with sale prices, that's nowhere. It's well below what it would sell for. So you actually going to hit the 92%. But you know, if there's a reduction coming really quickly right after this massive increase in sale prices, you know, maybe that's a wise on George's part. But
well, I think that we're likely, those of us that stay with this budget process, we're likely to be in the same situation next year. This is part of my concern, in that evaluations are going to continue to go up and have an impact the way they are this year, but we're not going to have the additional revenues that we have this year to bring that peak of the tax rate down. So, you know, it could be not a significantly larger hit, but, you know, it could be next year might actually be the year that we peak in terms of the bond.
We might see better new construction growth next year.
True. I mean, we can't worry necessarily about next year, but I think we may be faced with a similar scenario when we go into this. On the one hand, it's a good problem. We do want our valuations to go up. That's good for the community as a whole. But the downside is, yeah, your house is worth more money. You pay more taxes on it. So it's a catch-22, so to speak.
Bob, you fall right in line with what the graph was saying. It's about $117 to $120 increase on your particular classification of home and change in valuation.
So $10 a month for me.
Again,
basically,
Steve, could you tell me what we estimated for Bob's range? Since we're talking about Bob, what was estimated with the discussion with the bonds? You had that chart, so.
Yep. Well, I've got a $225,000 home. It was estimated to be $155,000. So if you do the proportional piece, it's right on target.
It's actually below target. That's why do we have to give as much as $800,000? I guess is my question.
Well, again, that's that $800,000 cliff that's going to kick us right in the backside next year. How do you bring that?
I'm worried.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, and I'm not trying to quell. I mean, it's 832. I really do think that's a discussion for next time because that cliff is significant. And again, I know I get a sense that if the money was there, if there was a way to do this, that we would put those positions in. But this just isn't the time to do that. I think, and I get that sense from the other members of the budget committee.
I'm not talking about positions. I'm talking about can we reduce the 800,000, the million net taxation? Can that be a different number and the lower number and still make it okay with us so that the cliff isn't so bad next year?
Yep. Yeah. No, I understand that. I was just speaking to what I feel my general sense is of those four positions with the budget committee. I think if there was a way to do this, we would be in favor of doing it. We recognize all the things that people have said, Chief Bonatti and Ms. Bouchard, who spoke earlier this evening. We do take that information seriously. It just doesn't seem like economically it's something we're going to be able to do this year. But that, again, is a future discussion. It's not completely off the table yet. Once again, I'll ask anything else. Steve, go ahead.
Yep. So I just want to bring back, former Mayor Cody, he sat on the budget committee for a period of time, ultimately became our mayor. And towards the end of his service in that regard, we were really honing into what's the sustainability level, right, in the community. So that's where those targets were coming from, because there was a realization what you put off today, you pay that much more for in the future, i.e. the roads, the capital plan in general, and such under that, and the avoidance of these, the cliffs, so to speak. So that's where those sustainability pieces came in. So I realized that we're in a very unique situation. When, if ever, again, would we see in our time in doing this kind of money come at us from the federal government, such under that. But I just don't want to lose sight as we go forward in the further discussion about maintaining that sustainability aspect. In other words, it's small incremental increases in the tax bill, far better than hold, and then bang.
Absolutely. I mean, that's in the whole process, the whole budget process, that has been both in working for a school district and in the work that I've done here in Sanford, is that, if I've said this before, I apologize, but like the hare and the tortoise, that slow and steady wins the race. So again, that sustainability piece is there. And Steve, if you want to going to say briefly speak to the impact of these changes that we're talking about on that sustainability percentage, you're welcome to do that next week, because I think that's also something we have to keep on the drawing board here as we go forward.
I think this discussion is excellent. I just want to recognize it's been incredible continuity coming forward with the budget committee this year, even though you haven't finished your work yet. I truly appreciate that. And I think we can achieve the objectives that everybody's trying to get to by the time we end out this process, and be able to treat the taxpayers well. All right, great. And thank you for that. Similar statements from me. I think everybody's done a fantastic job here. I know we're not done yet, but I certainly appreciate the work everybody's done. And I hope that you understand my process as an inclusive process. I hope you all feel included in the process and feel you've been heard and your points have been made. If you don't feel that way, let me know. Send me an email or call me or something. But that's how I'm perceiving things. Okay, so I'm going to adjourn the meeting until April 8th. That will be our next date. Okay, I should say I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Our next meeting is April 8th, rather than muddy the waters, because you can adjourn a meeting. We're ending. Okay, once again, thank you all. You got next Thursday off, so plan something nice to do with your family. All right.